All right. Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining us today. Welcome to our Learning Network session. We still have some folks trickling in, but I will keep letting folks into the meeting as we start our conversation. For those of you who don't know us, Pathways to Resilience is a national initiative to promote healing-centered, trauma-responsive policies, programs, and practices in states across the country. We host bi-monthly learning network sessions focusing on an array of topics that folks can use in their states, in their state agencies, in their organizations, in their communities to further trauma-responsive and healing-centered behaviors. These sessions will be recorded and we'll post them on our website. You can find them at pathways-us.org, which I'll link to in the chat. And today we'll be discussing the importance of youth voices and youth engagement in policy development and program design, and the ways in which states and organizational leadership can meaningfully invite and encourage youth engagement. We'll hear from our three speakers who you see on screen with me, Maida Barrios, Lauren Leonardis, and Tim Woody, all of whom are actively engaged in supporting youth engagement in different sectors. I want to encourage all of you in the audience to chime in via chat. You can engage with one another and share resources in the chat. You can engage and ask questions of the speakers. They may not be able to type out a response in conversation, but we'll always, see and try to incorporate your questions into our remarks. So please don't be shy. We love chat engagement as much as possible. So to start the session, I would like to sort of level the playing field with a shared understanding about why it's so important to engage young people. I think broadly, many people know about engaging folks with lived experience and lived expertise. That's been a really hot topic the last couple of years. But why is it so important to work with and focus on engaging young people? So Maida, if I can turn it to you to start, can you please introduce yourself? You can share a little bit about your background and your current role and work, and then speak to the value of youth engagement.
Hi, everyone. I'm so excited to be here. Like you said, my name is Maida. I'm a two-time graduate from Delaware State University. I received my bachelor's and my master's in social work. I am currently a foster parent recruiter within the state of Delaware. And then on the side, I also own my own business as a keynote speaker. So I travel to different states, including my own, doing different presentations, workshops, events, things of that sort, really focusing on youth engagement. So that's part of why I'm really excited to be here because this is my field. um, but that's a little bit about me. I've done a lot of community work as well outside of just advocating for foster care youth, but also just community service in general and really just being involved with the community. So to answer our first question, which is why is youth engagement so important and the value of it? Considering my career started from being involved as a youth, I think that for me is what's most valuable. I probably wouldn't have been in this career had I not gotten involved when I was a little bit younger. I got involved with the Youth Advisory Council for the state of Delaware, which is a organization that's dedicated to providing support and services to youth in foster care. And our main mission is to advocate and find ways to kind of make the system better. And I remember during my time in foster care, I had a family court judge that saw something in me and was like, "Oh, Maida, you should go run and get involved." And I'm like, run for president. And I'm looking at her like, I'm only 15. Like, I don't know nothing about this. I don't know what it means to lead. I don't know what it means to be president. I don't know what it means to advocate or be the voice for anyone. Like, you're going to just put me into something that I have no experience on, right? And thankfully, I was able to kind of take that opportunity and run with it. And literally, it's the reason why I'm in the career that I am now. I was originally an education major when I went into college. So when I ran for president, I was, I think, in my sophomore year of college and eventually switched to social work. And that's where I'm at now. And that's why I've done a lot of advocacy work. And I think it speaks volumes because as a youth advocate, I've been able to not only pass bills in the state of Delaware, more specifically HB 123, but also just be a voice for those that aren't there yet, right? Because coming from foster care, a lot of times we feel silence, we feel we can't really achieve nothing. We want to beat the statistics because we all know the statistics for foster youth is not the best. But being able to even graduate and beat the 3% statistic of youth that graduate with a higher education degree was amazing. So just being able to be involved has allowed me to not only build for myself, but also pour into others and really inspire them to say, hey, don't let our past circumstances define your success, right? I've been super, super successful due to the support team that I did have. And I think being able to pour that into other youth so that they can get involved and realize the importance is what really matters. So that's a little bit about me and why it's important to me.
Thank you so much, Maida. And Lauren, same question for you, if you don't mind introducing yourself, giving a little bit of your background, and then the value of youth engagement and why you think this is so important.
Thanks, Lizzie. Hey, folks, my name is Lauren, or L. Leonardis. I use she, her pronouns. I'm based in Western Massachusetts, but when I started this work, I was actually in the Boston area. And so it's been a lot of years of being involved specifically in youth homelessness issues for me. And in my field, the reason that engaging young people is so important is because when we're trying to solve issues that are about young people, you need them at the table because they're the ones who know what's going on. So I myself have lived experience in youth homelessness, but now it's been like 10 years since that. I didn't experience homelessness through a pandemic or a Trump presidency or, can I say that? Whatever else, other things that have happened in the past few years, right? And so just the experience of that alone is very different. And while I might come from a place of lived experience, I think very similar to what Maida was saying before me, right? Now it's my job to bring up other young people into this space to use the experience and the knowledge that I have to help other young people engage in system change, and help identify the gaps and problems that are coming up today, because I'm not going to know. And I think that I like to say that we should all be working ourselves out of a job. Again, in the youth homelessness field, the goal here is that I'm ending youth homelessness. And so I should be working myself out of a job. But also anybody who doesn't have lived experience in the things that we're working on should be working themselves out of a job. These fields should be run by people with lived experience. We should be bringing up young people with lived experience into these spaces. And so that's the importance to me, is making sure that we are making meaningful, authentic spaces for young leaders to step into positions that really they have more expertise on in a lot of ways than we do now.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Lauren. And Tim, same question for you. If you could just please introduce yourself and then speak about what you most value about youth engagement as well.
Great. Thank you so much. Hello, everyone. My name is Tim Woody. I'm so excited to be here. Not just me here, but with the other two people here as well with me. This is a powerhouse of great speakers. So I'm excited for today. So I come from New Jersey as a representative of Department of Children and Family Services within the Office of Resilience, but also as a representative of someone who has lived experience. I've been starting my work in advocacy since the age of 17 when I was adopted into kinship care in New Jersey. From that, I was able to be on many platforms and panels to talk about keeping siblings together, platforms of being a guest speaker at many DCF events, and also advocating in the federal government as well. I feel to be a good public speaker, to be a good advocate for child welfare, it's important to know what is happening in your own state, but also know what is happening in other states to be the best representative in your state to make a change. And I say that is because every state has the states that they follow to see like who's doing better in those things, right? So for like New Jersey, we have our states, right, that we follow in those things, and then I'm able to say, hey, well, this state's doing this, why don't New Jersey does this, right? So in my work and doing those things, I've been able to sit on many tables and to be able to do some really cool change. I think the biggest thing I've been able to do in my career was 2 summers ago was to present in front of the Biden administration and present on 3 key policy areas. And in those 3 key policy areas with me and my team, we were able to do some great work in those areas, and also now those policies are now being established now. Going back to the question of youth engagement, it is important that youth have a voice at a table. You know, what the youth have been through cannot be taught in a textbook. It cannot be taught in a PowerPoint. It is taught by youth who have lived experience. And in New Jersey, we do a really good job of making sure that our youth are at the table, at the seat at the table. And a lot of this goes with our Office of Family Voice. Now, Office of Family Voice was established in 2018. It was an office that was combined with 20 youth, 15 through 23. And what this office does is it is right next to the commissioner's office. So any kind of policies that are done or made or changes are made first come through the Office of Family Voice and the council to adjust and get their opinions on, and then they are now pushed out. This is a super cool council that is done because they have lots of great power and influence in what they do and how they're able to make change through all the different offices that we have. And one of the questions here was talking about Lizzie, that you answered about how we can be able to pay youth for the lived experience, right? This council gets paid for everything that they do. So if they're asked to present in front of an audience, they are paid for their time. If they're asked to review policies and grants, they are paid for that time. So they're not just a token at the table, right? They are an employee of the state, making people aware of what youth need here today. Another great win that New Jersey has done, which I'm so proud about, which I wasn't able to take effect because I'm too old for this. The youth were able to advocate for Chafee spending. Chafee spending is a scholarship that holds federal dollars, right, for a youth to be able to go on to excel on a vocational school, college, and so forth. And in that grant money, there was a age gap of 21, right? So if you think about 21, it doesn't give a youth enough time to fail per se, right, and figure out what they really want to do, right? And years ago, when I was age 17, I went to DC multiple times with the state and saying, hey, we need this age to be changed to 21 through 26. And how we did that was, in my being, was a traditional family. Now we know that traditional is very stretched, right? But we say traditional family, a person who will have, a mom and dad, mom and mom, whoever that you would have, right? Raising you. And then traditionally you would have, homework is at 6 o'clock, then dinner time's at 7, and then bedtime's at 9, right? And then those are something that you usually would have from when you're in elementary school all the way down to high school, right? But most kids in foster care don't have that structure in their life, right? They're picking up people, to go to school, they're cooking dinner, right? And then when they get to college, it's so hard to manage, 5 classes, studying, and all those things, right? So when we extend the age to 21 to 26, it allows that youth to be able to fail, figure out what they want to do. It allows them to be able to jump around if they want to go to colleges and stuff like that. And it also gives them the support to be able to not have to depend on a cosign or to sign off for loans, right? And that was the biggest thing. I was granted that I had parents that were able to co-sign loans for me, but that's not for every kid in foster care. So those are 2 big wins that New Jersey has done. Has created a youth council, but has also able to create a space for youth to go to college until age 26.
That's awesome. Thanks so much for sharing about that, Tim. And you really segued nicely into our next question, which is starting to think about, so, we heard you all talk about the value, the importance of bringing up youth leaders and giving folks a seat at the table and really helping inform the issues that are impacting them the most. And so how do we do that? What are some strategies for best practices around achieving meaningful engagement with youth? So not that sort of tokenized, illustrative seat at the table, but a place where they can actually have impact and inform decision-making and change. So Lauren, if you don't mind, please starting us off with this, thinking about some strategies that folks could use.
Yeah, thanks, Lizzie. So I come from the youth homelessness world, and in that space, we have a grant called YHGP, which is specifically a grant from HUD that requires youth engagement at the table. And what that looks like is that a lot of communities across the country have developed youth action boards. And so I have been doing technical assistance around youth action boards for I don't know how many years now. It's been a long time. And I think I love the technical aspects of this because I think that's where I shine in figuring those things out. So really strategies that work for me have been identifying your budget, understanding what your capacity actually is. You can't just throw a net out there and invite a group of young people and say, like, you guys have the power to do whatever you want. And that's not true. It's just not true. You need to set realistic containers. Because if you're telling young people they can do whatever they want, and you haven't set that realistic container, what you're then going to have to do is turn around and give them a lot of no answers because they can't actually do whatever they want. So one strategy for meaningful youth engagement is understanding your budget capacity, which also means understanding your funding source and what you're allowed to do with that money, what goals there are with that money, so that you can then be transparent. So that's number 2 is transparency, being extremely transparent with the young people that you're working with to say, look, like, here's what we're capable of doing with this money. Here's the timeline we've been given. These are things outside of our control, but here are the things inside of our control, and we can figure out how to mold those in ways that are youth-friendly and youth-centered. And then I think the other thing is that a challenge that I've seen a lot of communities face is, again, they'll do this cast the net method where they invite however many young people are willing to show up. In some communities, that'll be a lot. Like, again, I come from doing this work in Boston. I was the co-director of the Boston Youth Action Board and ran that for about 5 years. And sometimes we'd have like up to 30 people attending our YAB meetings. But again, we were a city, we had a big budget, so we could support that. But what I learned in doing that for a number of years was that inviting 30 plus young people to the table and not actually developing specific leadership roles, not actually investing in specific time and setting aside time for any of them, meant that we weren't actually creating opportunity for youth leadership. What we were creating was an opportunity for myself and my colleagues to take all of their ideas and then go do our jobs better with it. And so that's a big thing that you need to recognize. Don't invite an open-ended number of young people to the table. Identify your capacity for your budget. Identify what it is you want them to be working on with you. How many hours does it take to actually get that work done? So I'm sure we've all either been a supervisor or been in supervision, right? So you know that anytime you're working on a project, your supervisor is also working on that project, at least a little bit, right? So thinking about the capacity to make sure you have a lead person who can be supporting and supervising and teaching and training and learning alongside, you need to have someone who has that time to invest. And then you need to identify how much time does that person have to invest. And then you can decide how many young people you can actually authentically engage. I like to aim for 3 or 4. I think 1 or 2 means that you have extremely limited ability to create diversity. You're not creating a real team environment. If one person can't show up, it all falls on the shoulders of the other person, and that's just too much. 3 or 4 young people, you have a team, there's a cohort mentality there. They can support each other, bounce ideas off each other, and they feel like they're in it together in a different way. And it's a much more manageable number for a budget and actually authentically engaging people. You can't invite 30 young people to your COC meetings or committees or whatever else there is going on. But you could invite 4 young people to be a part of those committees. And so how can you create space to support that? When it's by paying them as employees. That's the key piece that I forgot there. You should actually hire them as staff. Don't be stipending people There's a whole tax situation that gets messy there that y'all should just Google because I don't have the time to get into it here. But after $600, you're legally required to report that to the IRS, and then they're taxed on that. And it's a whole mess. So hire young people, hire a certain number of young people you know you can support, and then engage them in real work.
Thank you, Lauren. Those are great suggestions for meaningful engagement. I especially like the piece about like developing specific leadership skills and roles in these youth that are then transferable to their, to their adult roles and their capacity and ability to do this work in a meaningful way. So thank you so much for that. Maida, do you have any strategies for emphasis on meaningful youth engagement that you want to share with folks, especially as a person who is engaged in youth council yourself?
Yeah, and I think Lauren did an amazing job with all of those suggestions. So shout out to Lauren because I don't know how I'm gonna follow that up. But I think for us in the state of Delaware, a strategy that worked and it made a big difference was peer-to-peer support. And that role of being, for lack of better words right now, like a role model, right? Because when I went in and served as president and did all that, I didn't have somebody older than me who I went through the same shoes to look up to. I was kind of just thrown into it and I was like, well, got to figure it out now, right? So then when my time ended as president back in 2020, we have had no luck with regaining our executive board for the organization. And part of that was because we were trying to have adults recruit and bring youth in and keep them involved with the work we were trying to do, but they didn't want to hear that from adults because they don't know what it's like to serve as president of the youth advisory council. They didn't know what it meant to be the voice for your peers. They don't know none of that, right? They never served in those capacities. And so for me, what I did was I had to come back and say, all right, well, we're trying to form a board. We're trying to get our youth engaged and to also retain them, because we don't want a youth to serve as president for 1 month and then leave, right? We also want to retain our youth, especially if they're bringing a lot to the table. And so I had to step in and say, okay, well, if I'm coming in as that role model for them, as the older peer that went through this and served as president for 2 years and did a good job and, passed legislation and advocated and did X, Y, and Z, I can be that voice for them to say, hey, like, you got this, you can do this. Like, I went through it. So if I could do it too, and it allowed me to be successful and it gave me opportunities to pass a bill, it gave me opportunities to advocate, to travel the states and different things of that sort. Why not build that bridge with them so that they can also walk across that bridge and say, hey, like, I can do this too. And I have support from somebody that walked across the bridge before me. You know what I mean? So I think for us that seemed to work. So if there's any opportunity to bring in not necessarily an older youth, but somebody that may have walked through the shoes that you're trying to fill, that seems to be very helpful, because then they can go to that person and say, hey, I'm struggling with youth retainment. How did you go about retaining the youth? You know what I mean? Like, it makes more sense. And we've actually been taking the steps in the right direction with me being involved now and really inspiring the youth. Like, hey, like, I served as president, I want you to do it. Like, I see something in you that you probably don't see in yourself. And that's what my judge did to me. She was like, I see this in you. And I'm like, I don't know what you see. Because at the time I'm 15. So I'm like, I don't know what you see, but clearly you saw something. I changed my major and here I am, right? So being able to be that older person for them and say, hey, I was in your same shoes. I didn't want to do this. I didn't know what I was walking into, but having done it now, I want to be able to encourage you guys to do it and also get them to retain that engagement so that they can also carry that down to the next board, right? And I try to use that strategy with youth engagement in general, right? Just being that person that has went through these different things, and teaching them and showing them the ropes and the tricks and the skills. Like, I know what skills are needed to do this, and I know how you need to do this, and whatever the case may be, right? And just being able to be that role model for them tends to have youth want to be more involved because they see someone else did it who looks like them, is one of their peers, went through the same stuff, versus it coming from an adult or somebody that didn't go through the system, somebody that doesn't have lived experience or served in that capacity. So that's my little tidbit.
Definitely. And I feel like that's a strategy, peer support, peer-to-peer support is a strategy being used in so many different sectors right now. And it makes so much sense, I think, when we're talking about youth engagement as well. So thank you so much for bringing that up. And Tim, I know that the other two speakers just had a lot of strategies. Do you have any additional strategies you want to add for?
Yes.
Yeah, go for it.
I'm just blown away. That all sounds good. I'm good to go home right now. But I think that the thing that I just want to capture is, and I'll list some things what New Jersey is doing, is we need to make sure we capture the voices of the good youth that we serve, and also the youth that give us all the trouble. Right? We have an idea that when we're looking for surveys, we always pick all the good families, not the ones that are always calling us for different things or that make life a little bit stressful. Right? Because the ones that have more struggles than the other ones are still worth their opinion as well. That should also be on our committees as well. Sometimes we know how to pick what the survey will find out by just picking a certain amount of people, right? And it's funny because I learned that last night in my master's program of public administration, and we talked about research and all that stuff. And I said, that makes sense. We have so many surveys, and it's funny, when I was in the system, I was a person that got picked for every single survey. And I'm like, how is this happening? Why? Because our case went awfully pretty well, but are they getting asking questions to my friend on the other side who's really struggling, that doesn't have great foster parents and all those things, and asking him, what they can do as well. A couple things what New Jersey is doing, and they are piloting a program called the Enlightenment. It's a peer-to-peer as well, as we also heard, and it's a peer-to-peer program that is really there to give offer advice, guidance, and empowerment strategies. And it's being piloted into the 9 counties within New Jersey, and I'm super excited for this because it's a thing where New Jersey, if you ask New Jersey 10 years ago, they didn't have nothing where Youth Voice was. Youth Voice was maybe just a few kids as myself going around New Jersey talking about what needs to be done. But now we have established a thing of Youth Voice, bringing youth to the table. Now, I've been in the state government for working as a salary staff for 5 years almost, right? And through those 5 years, I've been able to see so much change, which is fantastic. I actually just saw that we just hired 3 youth with lived experience all throughout the state government, which was fantastic, right? Bringing them to the table, having them start with a salary, getting a state ID, and actually being invited to the state table. Another thing is that we have done in New Jersey is youth want to know where the resources are, right? Our states don't do a good job of updating government websites. We know government websites are very old, right? And very not up to date, and information is not up to date. So what the youth did was said, hey, we want to be able to be successful and independent and not always depend on our social workers and all those things, because sometimes they don't know what's updated and not, right? We need a system where we can be able to, a website that can be able to provide everything that we have here to be able to do the work. So if you look on your Google, New Jersey Resource Spotlight website, that is all. So it's New Jersey Resource Spotlight. And if you click on it, it has all of what a youth would need who is in foster care. It has like college applications. It has how to find resources for housing, apartment stuff, low income stuff, food stamps, all those things. It's all on this website. And this website was created by youth. And the cool thing about when you're talking about youth engagement, it's important that if your commissioner or director has that one with the youth as well, right? Has an open door with the youth. Now, I didn't tell you in the last question, the youth council meets with the commissioner regularly, right? So they're always having that one-to-one with executive staff of how they can be able to make the system better. Another thing that New Jersey has done with engagement with youth is youth from the council said, hey, I want to be able to see my brothers and sisters. We know that families are not just having 1 child or 2 child. Some of them have 4 or 5 or 6 brothers and sisters, right? So they were able to conduct a policy and a law. Now there's a law called the Siblings Bill of Rights, which was signed in January of 2023. And now there's a law where youth are able to see their siblings, if they get separated, and they're able to keep siblings together, right? Sometimes when you're in foster care, you and your brother, you and your sister are the only ones that you got. So it's important that we still keep that connection with youth and families.
Thank you so much, Tim. And I just wanted to point out, we had an audience question about receiving quality input from youth. And I think that, Tim, you really touched on that with talking about expanding, survey points to families and young people that you would typically not perhaps extend them to, because all youth input is good and valuable input. And so I just appreciated that piece as well. And Tim, you started to talk about some of the successes and successful initiatives that New Jersey has adopted, and I've put some of them in the chat as well. But for the other speakers, I know that we can't always discuss our clients or perhaps our internal initiatives, but are you able to share about any models or successful initiatives, or Maida, perhaps legislation that you helped to pass when in your time on the council, that you've seen that have had really positive, impactful outcomes, both for the organization or agency and for the youth that are powered by youth? And either of you can feel free to start with this.
It's a standoff. I'll go ahead and start. So I think some examples of successful initiatives. A community that I've been working with recently comes to mind, who, when I started working with them, I was really concerned that they weren't getting the kind of youth engagement. Again, for the grant that I provide CA for, it's a requirement from HUD to have youth engagement at the table. And so it's a very rapid timeline. And if you don't get it right from the start, things start to fall apart and you don't get the right engagement along the way. But there was this community who I've been supporting in other ways for years, who just couldn't get it together until they finally hired a lead person who was an older adult support. And so the model that worked really well there is that they had this older adult support person who didn't have lived experience, but is extremely in tune with working with and supporting young people. And she has been attending all of their meetings with them, teaching them how to do things like agenda writing and how to engage in meetings and providing support behind the scenes and all of those things. And I think this answers a little bit of the next question about barriers too, so forgive me. But I think one of the things that communities often struggle with is leaning a little too hard into the peer model, and not recognizing that peers need support from someone else too. Nobody shows up to a job and knows everything about how to do it, right? And so you need to make sure there's someone who has things like program management skills, wherever they got them from or however they got there shouldn't matter, but you need someone who knows how to do those things, how to facilitate a meeting, how to engage in the community, how to make those connections, who has the network, the time, all of those things. Again, going back to my previous point about capacity, you need an older adult person who has the capacity to provide all that support. Because this community, they struggled for years. They had young people at the table, they had loose engagement, but there was no real leadership. And so there was someone there supporting and working directly with them and providing that kind of one-on-one time and mentorship. And the turnaround from when she started, now they have 3 young people who are hired as staff at the organization, who work with her all the time and have done so many cool things since then. And they still have, in addition to those 3 people, they still have an open YAB meeting where it's kind of whoever can come, can come. So it's about creating space for all levels of that kind of engagement, where it's if you can't really commit, that's okay. We still have this space for you. But there is also that space to be building up different kinds of youth leadership. And none of that would have happened if they hadn't hired that person who could lead the work and support them.
I think that's such a great point, especially because if we're talking about hiring youth, right, hiring them as staff, you would never start a new job and just turn to your peers for support. You would always have someone with more experience to guide you and help you along the way, while still also turning to your colleagues and your peers for support, but not in that sort of reliance role. So I think that's a really, really excellent point. Thank you, Lauren. And Maida, did you have any thoughts about successful initiatives? I know both in your professional time and your time on the council.
Yeah, absolutely. So, a couple things I want to say. So and my answer is going to kind of reflect some of the other questions that we had too about strategies and things of that sort. But I think part of our success is still being shared now. And I think that's super important, being able to share the success that youth had when they were involved. And what I'm referring to is the passing of our bill, right? We constantly talk about it. We constantly talk about how that bill came about, where it started, which was at the Youth Advisory Council, and how it came from me and my vice president. And I think being able to share that with youth that are looking to get involved just gives them that outlet, like, oh, like, you guys were successful. You guys were able to pass a whole bill. Like, I want to do that too, you know, and it kind of helps with that retention rate, because any moment that I have an opportunity to share with the youth in my state to say, hey, do you remember HB 123? Yeah, we were behind that. And they're like, oh my God, like, I had no idea. Like, that youth were behind it. I thought it was like, I don't know, like legislators, you know, whatever, whatever. So being able to just share that that started with us as youth advocates has allowed them to really just look at, you know, advocacy in a different lens, right? And so just to kind of give you a little context on how HB 123 came about, which is a House bill that allows former foster youth to attend college tuition for free in my state. Huge, major. It actually started years ago. I had just became president, I think. So I was probably 16 or 17 at the time. This was probably 2016-ish. So I was just starting out, and I remember we were having a conversation. And like I said earlier, our main goal and mission of the Advisory Council for the state of Delaware is to advocate for different bills and different things to come out. So our goal is to be able to come together once a month and say, hey guys, this is what's going on. These are the challenges that youth in foster care are facing, because they're the ones currently experiencing it, right? Because it's geared towards the younger youth. And so we were sitting down at a meeting one day, you know, we're running our meeting like normal, and I'm like, hey guys, what are some of y'all challenges? Like, what's going on? Like, what can we take up to the legislators? What can we take up so that we can advocate for y'all? Because we're the voices for y'all. And my vice president at the time had to make a very hard decision. And when he shared that with us, what he shared was that he had to make a decision to either go to a school that provided housing for all 4 years, because at the time Delaware State University was the only college that allowed former foster youth to stay there throughout the school year, like during the breaks. I'm sure most of you guys know, like during Christmas and Thanksgiving, everyone has to go home. But Del State was the only one that allowed us to stay there over breaks. And what that did was that gave us stability, because not every time we may have somewhere to go for the holidays, right? I experienced it myself. So there was times where I was, you know, able to stay on campus. So Del State at the time was the only school in the state of Delaware that offered that. The other school that we had was University of Delaware. University of Delaware at the time had little to no resources for youth in foster care. And so his dilemma was he wanted to go to University of Delaware because that one offered a much better program for the career that he wanted to go down versus Del State. But Del State offered housing stability, right, in the long term. And so when he said that, I'm sitting here, we're all looking at him like, what you mean you got to choose between Del State and UD all because of housing? Like, you're literally choosing have housing over break or have no housing. That's crazy. You know what I mean? And so when that conversation happened, it instantly sparked something in us. And I remember sitting down and telling everyone, like, hey guys, is anyone else having this issue? Like, are you guys all feeling the same thing? Like having to choose between one school versus another, all because of housing? Like, housing should not be the ultimate factor, right? And so for us, that was a big thing. And so we started getting involved. We started reaching out to legislators. We got our first lady involved. We started calling on different partners and different people. It was like, hey, these are the issues we're having. Like, this is not okay. Why do we have to choose a school that gives us housing over a school that we actually want to go to that's going to set us up for our future, right? And so that's really how that started. And that all started with us as youth advocates, as youth that were involved. My entire board are youth, right? That's how it's ran, it's youth led. And so being able to just share that story over and over with our current youth and say, hey, like, this bill that you guys are benefiting from, that started here with you guys as youth advocates. I think it gives them that push to say, like, yeah, like we can do this too. If they did it, we can do it, because they're in the same shoes as us, right? So for me, that was kind of one of the big successes that we had in the state of Delaware, and I constantly talk about it because it really allowed us to get out of our bubble, get out of our shell, and advocate, be the voice. And now, mind you, it took 6 years, but 6 years later, we finally got that bill passed. And now so many people are like, Might, I had no idea you were behind that. Like, I can go to college now and I don't gotta worry about housing, or I don't gotta worry about tuition because it covers tuition and housing. So looking back, it was hard. Like I said, we started in 2016 and it didn't get signed until 2021. So roughly 4 or 5 years later, it went on pause, the whole nine. But we had to make videos, we were doing Zoom calls, like it was a lot. But being able to just see that success and the people that benefit from it, I'm constantly getting messages to this day like, Maida, like, thank you for making that bill happen. You know what I'm saying? So now my job is to get others to do the same. And that's our most recent bill. We haven't had no bills passed ever since because, like I said earlier, we're struggling to get our board back. But my goal is to be able to continue to share that story and say, hey guys, we can pass bills. Like we literally can pass bills. Like we have to be youth advocates. We have to step up to the plate. We have to use our voice because if not us, who? So that's my little tidbit once again.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. And you started to, I think that we've been talking about barriers throughout the conversation, but you started to mention this, Maida, with your board needing to come back together. You'd love to address the question about barriers?
In the chat.
Oh, perfect. Because I was gonna loop that into, we've also had a chat question about barriers to engagement and getting young people more engaged, as well as so thinking about barriers to engagement, barriers that the youth and young people are facing, and then also like some systemic and agency-wide barriers to implementing these initiatives in the first place. So Lauren, if you'd like to kick us off with this and maybe answering the question in the chat as well, that would be wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm sorry to interrupt. Yeah, I would love to talk about some barriers. So Lily, I know this question comes from a place of wanting to get people engaged, so please take this in the best way possible. But those students should not be speaking for the people who are not at those meetings. They shouldn't be told that it's okay to speak for underprivileged folks who can't get to the meeting. My recommendation would be to figure out what the barriers are to having the correct representation there. So to identify what those barriers are, you could look at maybe putting those meetings in more accessible locations where other students who don't have that kind of transportation can attend. You could look at making those meetings accessible on Zoom so that students can attend. You could pay them for their time to be there so that maybe they have the ability to afford transportation to get there. But I just want to really strongly say that there shouldn't be a space where you're asking privileged students to speak for students who are not represented in that space. I think that's where a lot of unintentional harm can come from in the policy world. And I think it'd be best to just squash that and not let that happen, which is why I just really wanted to address it and say, I know that it comes from a place of wanting to teach leadership and getting people involved. And those things are really important, but I want to make sure we focus on breaking down the barrier that's preventing people from being there to begin with. And I'll let the other folks speak more to it if they want.
Thank you so much, Lauren. And Tim, do you have any thoughts about potential barriers? Again, this can be barriers to youth engagement or systemic barriers to standing up a council or an initiative.
Yeah, so I just wanted to jump back to what Maida was saying about the question before, because I want to add something there and then I can go to this. So I think it's also important we're talking about youth engagement and we're talking about youth employment of lived experience, right? But it's important that we understand that if a youth is coming into youth employment to the state, it doesn't mean that they need to be a social worker, right? To work on the front lines, right? It doesn't mean that they might, for myself, right? I live, in foster care, all those things, right? My expertise is not working with families and children, right? My expertise is being in a suit and tie every day at work, talking to administrators and CEOs and executives, right? That's where my strongness is, my advocacy is, right? So when I say that is sometimes youth will live experiences, oh, I want to be a social worker, I want to be this, and those might be good, but for me, it's very traumatizing to hear those stories, right? So I'm better at using, being, a administrator, right? For the same thing, but doing something different. So I also think for engagement and barriers, just as what was spoken to the other two panelists, is that seeing what the youth's talents are, right? You might have a youth who is great at social media that can be able to make a post, that can be able to take films and cameras and those things, right? So I think when we are engaging youth and asking what their talents are to bring to policy reform and those sort of things, we can definitely, do some really great work. Going to the questions about barriers and things like that, I think the biggest thing is youth need to be paid for what they're being asked to do, right? That's a huge thing. youth are doing a lot of things and they want to be involved, but they have to be paid for what they're doing. And for the question in the chat, I would love to talk to you offline a little bit because transportation is a big issue for us as well here in New Jersey. But we were able to still get youth throughout all different counties to come be on the council, right? There's a lot of ways how you can, I like to say, finesse, right? Funding and how you're able to use funding and ask certain questions of how it can be spent. Sometimes what we use Uber, right? We were also able to pay caseworkers a little more money or overtime to bring those students to our building that we were having those meetings, right? We were able to ask churches to have some space in there, which is sometimes will be for free. We were able to do little pop-up areas and those things and stuff like that to be able to make sure that we're capturing everyone's voice. Some of the barriers that I think is the biggest thing is we lack clarity and transparency, meaning that we want to make sure that we're not just saying that we're youth, that we can make these changes. These changes are going to happen, just like this, a snap of a hat, right? We know that change in state government doesn't happen as fast, right? So being realistic and what we can and can't do is the most biggest thing. State has in New Jersey per se, there could be money here for one initiative, and then the next day it could be gone, right? And that's just how it works. The commissioner can say this one day, and then give them another couple minutes, and they can say something else different, right? So knowing that we have to be able to be true to ourselves and what we can do, and knowing that when we're starting initiatives, just know that changes will keep happening, right? But also, youth need someone that they can trust, right? I think the biggest thing that we struggle with is trusting, right? Are you really going to do what you say you're going to do, right? Because through all of our lives, we've always been disappointed, and and that trust have been turned into lies and all those things, right? So, outstretching to be truthful, being able to be very clear of what can and can't be done, and also being there to be saying, hey, what are your talents to bring so we can be able to decrease some of these barriers, and I think when we have those three things, you can do a lot of great damage. And we all know that change takes a long time. It took her initiative 5 years. The initiative for the website and the things I listed from before took about 10, right? But when I heard about that it happened, I literally was sitting in a meeting, just my own business, talking on Zoom, Zoom, like, you're not paying attention anyway, right? And they said, well, now the umbrella scholarship for foster care is 26. I said, wait, am I dreaming? I said, wait, what? That happened? And they're like, yeah, like, why? I said, I was advocating about that 10 years ago. You don't know like how many lives it's going to change and all these things. And I said, I'm just so excited, right? So it was able to take these leaders that were like, okay, Tim, who cares? No, this is a huge win, right? So when you have these big wins as she's getting, tell the people, tell everyone that's going on, right? Tell them that, hey, we need more. And when you have those big wins, it gives you an idea that, hey, I have the power to change. It might take years to come, but it's coming. I can't walk down in Trenton where our state office is and people running into me. Are you Tim Woody? Yeah, I'm Tim. Or you did this, all that stuff. That happens all the time, right? And it's not a pride thing. It's with pride saying, yes, we did this. Yes, I might have been used to help, push this through, but it was your voices. It was you filling out all the surveys, you answering all those calls to be able to make change. I'm happy.
Absolutely. Thank you. And we're coming up against the hour here. Time really flies. And we always like to end our sessions with speakers offering one or two really actionable, tangible strategies that folks in the audience can bring back to their organization or their office or their community. And I feel like this session has been really jam-packed with a lot of really great strategies, solutions to, or ways to work around some of the many barriers you all mentioned. But I would just love if you each could pick one or two of your most important action items that you would recommend to folks who are looking to either implement and stand up a youth engagement initiative or improve one that already exists. And Maida, can you kick us off with this one, please?
Yes. Before I share that, though, I did want to add something to the question that was asked a little early in the chat. My organization that I work with, we have a workshop called Family Privilege, and I think that it sounds like that might be something your youth may benefit from is that training. And what it does is it really just kind of just broadens the perspectives that our youth are looking into when they're doing these types of things for advocacy. I was trained on it like 5 years ago, and then now I've delivered that training to different audiences. So if you're interested, I'll make sure to leave my contact, and that might be something that your group could benefit from, some kind of training that just really allows them to broaden their horizons, broaden their perspectives, because that's really what it's all about too, is kind of like educating our youth. So that's kind of how I'll transition into my action item: research and really educate our youth at the same time, right? Because at the end of the day, like, if we're not building them up to be better leaders, if we're not building them up to be better advocates, if we're not building them up to be better individuals, and be great people, then are we really doing anything to them, or are we being of disservice, right? So really just providing that push of like education and research and those skills needed to be, independent, or just like a good advocate, whatever that looks like, depending on your organization. I know I learned a lot during my time from people that were in those different positions. So whether that was social workers that I was working with, or the state of Delaware, I was able to network, and just I took a lot from it. So really just make sure that you're setting it up to in a way that like the youth are able to benefit, because yes, it's cool for the youth to get involved and deliver the work, but what are they also getting out of it? Give them that personal development, give them those whatever that looks like, right? And make sure we're also giving them something to take away from the experience. And I know I was able to take away a lot. So that's kind of my tidbit. Find whatever works for you and your organization and your youth engagement. Make sure that you're pouring into them as much as they're doing the work for you.
Thank you so much, Maida. And Tim, your 2 action items.
Great, thank you so much. I was thinking about this, and what I wrote, I'm like, I'm not sure if I like that. So, I think the 2 action items that I want to leave you with is provide youth support in knowing how to run meetings, knowing how to leading messaging and leading conversations. Provide them with the support to be able to advocate for themselves. Provide them the support to how to generate a professional email. Right, knowing what to put in a subject line. Provide support of what they should have to wear when they want to be treated, to be treated professionally, like wearing a suit and a tie, tucking in your shirt. Provide them the skills that they need to be successful as they go on with their advocacy. Right, and also, as I said in the beginning of my introduction, was encourage your youth to join other federal nonprofits that are going around. I think, Lizzie, I would love to connect with you, and maybe I can give you some that I know, right? Because to be a true good advocate, and I'm sure these EDL panels will say is you have to know what everyone is doing, right? You don't be I want to say distracted, but that's not the word I'm looking for. But don't be sad if you get a no. I'm sure all of us have gotten no's before, right? But that no is the push to say, okay, you said no for this. What about this? And that's the biggest thing I want to lead with us. Train the youth to be able to be good advocates for themselves. Teach them the skills that but also accept no, but know that your no is your power to keep going forward and forward and forward until you get your yes, and until you're able to push that bill or law or policy that you're trying to change.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And Lauren, can you close us out, please?
Absolutely, Lizzie. Yeah, I think my big leave thing for you would be really get serious about what your capacity looks like. Get it on paper. Talk to your organization about the budget. Don't go forth and invite young people to something that you can't actually uphold and keep going on. I would also leave you with, we didn't get to talk about this here today, but look up the word adultism. Just Google that. There's stuff out there. Please go search for it. And just to add to some of what Tim said, right? There's places and times for suits and ties, but also teach your people, teach your community how to authentically engage with young people as they are. Because I'm sure as heck not dressing up for this thing. Like, I'm wearing suspenders and I've got my hair a mess. I've got my pole behind me. Like, I'm not showing up here professionally right now. And young people shouldn't have to either. So look up adultism. Teach your community how to engage with young people as they are, because their perspectives are worthwhile, even if they don't speak and show up the same way as you.
Thank you so much. And thank you all in the audience for being here with us today. Panelists, we really value your insight. This was so full of strategies. I feel like I have like a to-do list now for meaningful youth engagement. And just thank you all so much for your intention and your time and your thoughtfulness about supporting and amplifying youth voices. To folks in the audience, we'll be back with our next learning network session in 2024. Next year, we're engaging in a bunch of different topics, supporting foster parent retention, the impact of social media on youth, building capacity in the behavioral health workforce, healing through animal-assisted therapy, like just running the gamut of different topics related to healing-centered and trauma-responsive policies, practices, and programs. So be sure to follow along on social media, sign up for our mailing list, which I put in the chat earlier, if you want to stay up to date with us. Also, if you like these sessions and you have an idea for a topic that you want covered, or you want to speak about your work and share a topic, you can always reach out to me. I'll put my email in the chat. I see our other speakers have put their emails in the chat as well. And just thank you all so much for your time and your thoughtfulness today. And I wish you all a happy, healthy holiday season. And we will look forward to seeing you in the new year. Thanks so much, everyone. Have a great evening.